All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our Spring 2025 presentation of the Medical History Interest Group Lecture Series. My name is Molly Frazier and I'm the archivist for our history collections at Lapis Library. The Medical History Interest Group presentations are sponsored as part of the Ruth and John Moskop Lecture Series and the Lapis Library History Collections. If you have not done so already, please sign the attendance sheet and help yourselves to refreshments. While you're here, please have a look at our current exhibits, Aesthetics of Anatomy art display, and Plague of Piracy on the second floor, Artifact ABCs and Scientists and Their Microscopes on the fourth floor, and our Country Doctor Museum Medical Education exhibit in the History Collections Reading Room. Now I'll pass it over to Dr. Juan March to say a few words about our speaker.
Good afternoon. It's truly an honor and a privilege to introduce our speaker today, someone I've known for over 30 years. To give you a little background, after his medical school training at UNC Chapel Hill, he decided to do family medicine at the Medical University of South Carolina to do his residency in family medicine. But interestingly enough, while he was there, his passion changed a little bit, and that's how he started with emergency medicine. And it was from there that he came here to Greenville, North Carolina. And our medical school at the time was literally just a fledgling school. It still hadn't graduated any students yet. And he was to become the founding chairman for the Department of Emergency Medicine. I could spend literally an hour talking about all that he's done, but instead I'm just going to go ahead and pass the mic to him and let him tell us a little about all of his stories. Again, please welcome Dr. Jack Allison.
Thank you. Well, folks, it's really fun to be here. Off to a great start. But first of all, I wanted to thank Molly for all of her help and support to be here today, and I'm really eager to share with you a bit of history. I want to tell you, first of all, that the first part is going to be about emergency medicine. And then the second part, Molly asked me to share some of the issues of my dealing with public health, particularly in Africa, but in quite a few other places as well. So let's get going. So, oh boy. The history of emergency medicine, really, we call it the alphabet soup because it boils down to so many acronyms. But the legend has it that there were two groups of emergency physicians, one in Pontiac, Michigan, the other and Jim Mills was with the Alexandria group, and he became the second president. So they went from 8 physicians, then they phagocytized the Alexandria group, and then today there are over 40,000 practicing emergency physicians, particularly members of ACEP. The American Board of Medical Specialties recognized emergency medicine as a specialty in 1972, but it was really complicated, and they made them they formed it as a modified conjunct board. Don't ask me about it. But they had 3 residency programs got started. The first was at the University of Cincinnati. Believe it or not, was a residency of one. Bruce Janiak was the very first resident in emergency medicine. The next year, USC and LA had a group of residents. In 72, it was MCP, and that covered the entire country. The Society of Academic Emergency Medicine was formed in 1990, and it was the union of these two groups that were doing pretty much the same thing, and I had the honor of serving on the committee that brought the two together. The American Board of Emergency Medicine was formed earlier, but the problem is that they kept getting jerked around by the American Board of Medical Specialties and other specialties. The ones who were the biggest stumbling block were the internists. They realized that at academic institutions they were losing because usually the EDs were manned by internists, and if they needed a PD pod or they needed a surgeon or they needed whatever, they would give a call down, and there was a lot of haggling and going back and forth. But finally, it was actually 1979, ABEM made a major push, and they got board recognition in 1980. They kept haggling for a long time, but to no avail. So let's get to here. In 1980, I had the good fortune of being the first chair of emergency medicine here. I interviewed back in April of that year, and Bill Lopus, the dean, for whom this library is named, gave me so much support. But what I found out pretty quickly was that it was like building an airplane as it's trying to take off, because it was really tough. We had so many patient visits. The year before I got here, there were 26,000. The year, my first year here, we gained by 4,000. When I left at the end of '96, it was well over 65,000, and today I've been told it's over 130,000 patient visits a year. So it really was tough to come in to have faculty who were taking care of sick folks in the ED. Number one, we were understaffed. Number two, they were not academic folks, and it was very tedious and tenuous to try to allow these people to be on a decrescendo while I had a crescendo of academic emergency physicians. Early on, we decided to have a division of EMS. We got involved with regional conferences and teaching. And Eastern Pines, a lot of folks don't know this, but it was the very first all-volunteer paramedic program in North Carolina. And believe it or not, in the city of Greenville at the time, they had intermediate EMTs and not paramedics. We started the helicopter program on paper in 1983. And I and a couple of folks went over to Duke, and we asked them, hey, can you have a helicopter program? Would you be amenable to helping us so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel? And I can't tell you how we were treated, because I'd get into some unpleasant words. But what we did then is that we went up to Norfolk, and their helicopter program was thriving. We went to Duke to ask them if they would help us, but they were phagocytizing our patients. They were flying from Duke, coming down here, picking up patients in eastern North Carolina and taking them back to Durham. When we went up to Norfolk, they were the most gracious folks known to personkind. They helped us, and there were 3 people involved in bringing the chopper system here, myself, another chap, and Dr. Chris Mansfield. And Chris is a PhD person, but he was the one, non-medical, but he was the one that kept us on the straight and narrow and made sure that we did stuff right. So, research. I demanded early on, and demanded is a strong word, I asked folks if they would do research and publications. And the way I approached it was the carrot method without the stick. I didn't say, if you don't do research, I'm going to whack you. I just held out a carrot and said, listen, you get a paper accepted anywhere in the whole wide world, and it's up to me to make sure you get to present your paper. Well, as soon as people started coming back from London and Ontario and Acapulco and other Brisbane, Australia, that they said, gee whiz, I think I'd really like to get a paper published too. The other was that I asked folks, why don't you team up in at least groups of 3s or 4s? And Charlie, you be first author on this one. Judy, you be first author on that one, that, and help each other. And at the end of the rainbow, how many papers do you end up with on your CV? At least 4. And it honestly worked. And in 1996, there was a paper published about research that had been published with resident involvement, because another thing I asked very strongly was, in order to be graduated from this residency program, you have to present a research presentation to the entire department, to the faculty. And if you didn't present, you didn't graduate. And that way, people would go to faculty members and say, can you help me with this project? And it went from sort of anemic all the way to first-class stuff. Well, in 1996, a paper was published nationally, and our department was number 3 in the whole blinking country for publishing papers. We beat out who? Hopkins, Harvard, you name it. We were pretty far up the food chain. In 94, we had tornadoes that came through the county of Pitt and the environs, and we got a lot of patients in the ED. I remember being called in, and we spent the whole night there. We saw over 150 patients that night in the emergency department. And we wrote it up, and Dr. Susan McCammon and her partner in crime, it's a typo, it's not Dunham, it's Durham, but Tom and Susan were key, and Susan particularly, and she ended up eventually becoming professor and chair of psychology here. So I'm going to break my arms, patting myself on the back about a few things, but I wanted to let you know that there were certain things that happened here that hadn't happened elsewhere, and I'm really pleased about it. One, you know, I was the founding chair, but I had let folks know that I wanted to have the first endowed chairmanship in emergency medicine internationally. And I did that to sort of spawn interest amongst the other academics here in North Carolina. We were the 3rd academic department. The first was at Winston-Salem. After, I think Charlotte was first, then Winston-Salem, then ECU, and eventually UNC. So I let them know at our North Carolina meeting that I was going to have the first endowed chair, and I failed miserably. I got the second. But I was on the residency review committee for emergency medicine. Those who don't know, the drill here is that every specialty has general requirements. So for surgery, pediatrics, internal medicine, emergency medicine, psychiatry, you name it, general requirements. But then the specifics come down for the specialty itself. And I had the good fortune of chairing that august group, and I also got to be vice chair of the RRC Chairman's Council. And I'm glad that George Podgorny, who was there before me, and we had to stand up because the internist always wanted to do damage, and we had to have a voice there to keep them in their place. I was the founding president of the International Federation for Emergency Medicine. That group was founded on paper, I think, in 1989, but it was lying fallow, and in 1991, I got to be president of ACEP nationally, and I got together, the big four were the Australasians, the Canadians, the Americans, and the Brits. And we all sat down and said, we got to do something with this. And so we formalized the group, and I got to be the first presiding president. So in my career, I got to go before two congressional committees. Once, the first one was when I was a med student at Chapel Hill to sing the praises of the AHEC system. And then when I was on the ACEP board, I got to go and speak about seat belts on school buses. We formed a highly competitive residency here, and a lot of folks don't realize just what a gem this place really is, because I think when ECU got its permission to be recognized with a residency, we were number 60, 61, and 62, or 61, 2, and 3. It was right in the low 60s, and we came in at that time. Do you have any idea how many residencies there are in emergency medicine today? 325 or so. And so it's gotten out of control, and the issue for ECU, the reason that it's so competitive is because of its excellence. And there are a lot of fly-by-night places, but people really clamor to come to what we used to call ECTC. Do you remember those days? East Carolina Teachers College? It's come a long way, folks. So I talked about research. There were 3 people who did really elegant research, and Juan March introduced me. He's an national international figure in EMS and EMS research, and Bill Meggs in toxicology. And one name I didn't put on the list, but it's Richard C. Hunt. Rick Hunt did some elegant research here, and the person who helped us with all our research papers is here amongst us today, Dr. Ted Whitley, and he did the stats for all of our papers. And Ted was with our department pretty darn close to 10 years, and during that time, I know he presented I mentioned a couple places, London, Brisbane, Toronto, and DC, and he was part of that. Then he told me he went to Hong Kong with Dr. Paul Cunningham, and I'll talk about Paul a little bit later. I was the only chair of the Board of Trustees of the Emergency Foundation who ever served 2 terms, and I think it was because I brought in a lot of money. But I got to be founding president of the Association of Academic Chairs of Emergency Medicine. I looked around, every specialty had their academic chairs. We didn't, so caused it to happen. So I have fellowships in ACEP, the American College of Preventive Medicine, and I was one of the founding fellows of the International Federation for Emergency Medicine. ACEP honored me with the Wittgenstein Leadership Award some years ago, and believe it or UNC School of Medicine honored me with the Distinguished Medical Alumni Award, and I'm from the class of 75, and so in April we will have our 50th anniversary due in Chapel Hill. And I received life membership in the North Carolina Medical Society. Believe it or not, the main campus honored me to become an honorary alumnus, and I didn't know what a big deal that was until it happened. I've received the Order of the Longleaf Pine, and a lot of folks don't know what that is, but it's the highest award that a civilian can receive in the state of North Carolina. The other three have to do with the second part of my talk today, but about my Peace Corps experience, and these three places have a repository of my involvement. Speaking of involvement, these are some of the countries. I know there are a few others and I couldn't remember, but Malawi is where I was a Peace Corps volunteer for 3 years. Zambia, South Africa, Canada, Kenya, Somalia, Tanzania, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Haiti, China, and Israel. Darn you. And I wanted to mention music diplomacy because I've written an op-ed for the Asheville Citizen-Times, and if it gets published, I'll send it to Molly and she can distribute it as she sees fit. But this is something that I've been involved with for a long time. So what I'd like to do now is transition, and I definitely want you all to be thinking about your questions, and I'd like to engage with you toward the end. So I went to a little junior college up near Asheville in Swannanoa, and it's called Warren Wilson College. It's one of 7 work-study colleges in the country. And I'm a Florida boy, not by birth, but by high school graduation. And I came up to North Carolina and did my 2 years there and transferred to Chapel Hill. I ended up doing 3 more years of undergraduate because I worked my way through Warren Wilson, but I also worked my way through UNC, and I was tired at the end, and I decided that, well, before I get there, the UNC Men's Glee Club, I was graduated in June of '66, undergrad, and the UNC Men's Glee Club was invited to be on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I got to sing with the Men's Glee Club. And we were going to sing 2 songs. And Ed Sullivan didn't like male choruses. He didn't like any choruses. But he heard us in rehearsal, and he went to Doc Carter, our director, and he said, "Hey, I really like your songs, but could you add one more song, and could you make it Southern?" Well, we did the most melodic, beautiful version of something we probably wouldn't get away with today, but we did Dixie, and it was really well received. And the Dave Clark 5 was really upset because they lost one song and we gained another, and they were not amused. So we went on a 6-week European tour, and we actually got into East Germany. We got to go to Leipzig. We got to go to St. Thomaskirche, where Bach is buried, and we were going to sing a Bach cantata. The problem was the organ had not been tuned since the death of Bach, and so we had to sing something a cappella instead. Okay, we got back. Bill Meggs is here. So when we got back, I had to work about 6 weeks, and I reported for Peace Corps training, and I was really happy to join the Peace Corps. I wanted a break because I'd done 5 years of undergrad. I'd worked the whole time, And I didn't want, I wanted to do more than flip burgers. So I joined the Peace Corps, and I ended up in Malawi in southeast central Africa. And Malawi's a 2-year hitch, and I had such an enchanted time, folks, that I stayed for a 3rd year. And it all started that after we ran under five's baby clinic, so we were all quote unquote paramedics. I hadn't gone to med school yet, and all of us in the group, not one was a physician. And what we did is that we took care of babies from birth to 5 years of age, and at that time we were allowed to give all of their immunizations. Well, the problem for us is that nothing was disposable. They didn't have disposable needles and syringes, and I had a little kerosene stove, and I had to boil the needles and the syringes and let them cool, and then give the kids their shots. And I had to be really, really careful. And I did that for 3 years running and never had an infection. I was really proud of that. So what happened was, after 3 months, because it was a new program, Peace Corps invited us to go to Lake Malawi. And if you look up Malawi on the map, Lake Malawi is actually the 3rd largest lake in all of Africa. And we were at a modest resort there, and it was the first tub bath that I'd had in 3 months. And they had this old-fashioned tub, and I got in there and I filled it was hot water, and I filled that sucker right up to here. But I was looking at the ceiling, and a volunteer who lived 7 miles south of me, she and I got together. We both, had our individual under fives clinics. She drew a great big fly on a poster, and I wrote in the national language in Chichewa, "Brush the flies out of your baby's eyes to prevent pink eye." Well, I was lying there, and I started to syncopate the words with some music, and I wrote my first song. I'd never written a song. I'd had 2.5 years of formal voice training as a college student, but I'd never written anything. So I went running down on the beach, and some gal remember the old cassette players that were about this big? And I asked her for an empty tape, and I went farther down on the beach by myself. I hummed or recorded the song so I wouldn't forget it. And a couple weeks later, I met up with the best band in all of Malawi. They were called the Jazz Giants, and we recorded the song. Well, in Malawi, there was only one radio station at the time. Damn it. I can't get it to... It won't move forward, Molly. Help me, please. So what happened was that song became really popular pretty darn quickly. And thank you. In Africa, anybody white is a European. It doesn't matter if you're from Greenland or Argentina. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you got white skin, you're a European. So they played the song, and people would write in and say, "Would you please play Brush the Flies on request night? Would you play for my girlfriend, Brush the Flies out of your baby's eyes?" And I was amused at that, but I got a lot of feedback. Well, what happened was, on my way back from having recorded that song, I wrote a song called Ufa Wantedza, and that means flour from peanuts, flour of peanuts. And the whole idea was to get mamas to take peanuts, pound them up, make it into flour, put it into their baby's cornmeal, maize porridge. We used to call it in the South cornmeal mush, and feed it to your kid 3 times a day. Well, what happened is that the song became so popular, it was played incessantly on the radio, and Philips in Holland came to me and said, you know, we want to test the record market in Malawi. You remember the old 45s with the big hole in the middle? Well, they pressed Ufa Wantedza, 10,000 copies, and at that time, Malawi was the poorest country in the whole wide world, and guess what? Sold out in 1 week. So what happened after that is that there was a group, a private group from London that came down, Granada TV, and they wanted to do a film about British volunteers in Malawi. They interviewed a nurse, a teacher, and a pharmacist, and they only had 20 minutes worth of material. So somebody whispered to them that I was pretty popular with my music. They came up and asked if they could film me in my clinic and that. But what they did, though, is that they used my song as background. And I'd signed a little chit saying, yeah, I'll accept royalties. I didn't know what that meant. All of a sudden, wheelbarrows full of money kept coming to my little hut in the village, and I had all this money that I was getting from both the record and from Granada TV, and I contacted Peace Corps. I wasn't allowed to keep the money, and they really were helpful. We set up a mini foundation, and I made enough money. The more money I made, the more money I gave away, and I kept making money. And I had enough money at the end of my 3-year tour to bring a kid home, a young man home with me and send him to Warren Wilson College. So I was also involved in a 5-month tour of Malawi where I would get up every morning really early, have a scone and a cup of tea, and get on the road, and I would visit 4 schools, and I would be there for a half hour each, and I would give a lecture about vector control, you know, flies and roaches and mosquitoes and whatever, and I had a handheld puppet, and I would usually sing at least one song a cappella to the kids, and I would encourage them. We tried to do it in a circle around where the chief was, so that I told him I'm going to start playing music at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, blast it away, and then it's when the sun goes down in Malawi, it's around 6. We had a generator and a spotlight and a little stage, and we put on a show until midnight, and it was amazing, because then after each song they'd say, okay, why did Jack sing Brush the Flies Out of Your Baby's Eyes? Point to a mama, usually with a baby on her back. She would come up on the stage. She'd never seen a microphone before. I mean, it was hilarious. But we had a puppet stage, and the puppet would pop up and pass judgment on the answers that people gave. And it was light seriousness, but it reinforced the teaching we were trying to do. So, what I'd like to do now is I would like to play for you Ufa Wantedza. And look at the words.
Ufa Wantedza, Ufa Wantedza, oh, Ufa Wantedza. Upalo, ana alo, ayanir pudio, oh, Ufa Wantedza, di tu mupala, Ufa Wantedza, Ufa Wantedza, oh, Ufa Wantedza, upalo, ana alo, ayanir pudio, oh, Ufa Wantedza, di tu mupala, gadi mufuna, ana alo kuti, akala guino, pasikelo,
I got to stop here because my time's limited. I don't know what in the world. Here it goes. Here, I think, there it goes. So, when I came home, I worked for about 6 months in a home for displaced children in Denver, and ended up coming back to Chapel Hill, and I got my MPH. And that helped me to catapult across the street to start medicine. And the whole idea of the Peace Corps, the third goal is bringing the world back home. Well, by the time I got to be a third year, we used to call it grunt, but a third year med student, I was involved. I was learning how to deliver babies. And when you go to Charlotte in the AHEC system, you got to deliver so many more babies than you did if you got to stay in Chapel Hill. So I was participating in delivering 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, and I decided I'm gonna write some music about the situation. So I wrote initially 3 songs about birth control. I'll play this one.
If you cannot love a child, why bring her into the world? If you cannot feed a child, why bring him into this world? There are easy ways of living and loving with freedom, night and day. So protect yourself, respect yourself, protect yourself, the family planning way.
Did you hear the flute? Well, I didn't add it to this because there's only so much room I have for my presentation, but after I'd done 3 songs and they were directed toward women, a few women raised their hands and said, "Jack, is that the best you can do, dude?" And I said, okay. So I wrote a song called "When You're Thinking About the Birds and the Bees, Think Vasectomy." All right, so then when I was a resident, I was contacted by a group called Meals for Millions Foundation, and somehow or another they'd heard about my music, and they asked me if I would do a song for them. Let me see. Let me make sure I got this right here. Here it is.
When you're thinking about the birds and the bees, think vasectomy. Oh, when you're thinking about your family, think vasectomy. If you've had all the kids that you want, and you're sure you don't want any more, think vasectomy. Tying the man's tubes is the way to choose. Birth control can be easy, it can be safe and sure and worry-free. So if you're thinking about the birds and the bees, please think vasectomy. So if you've had all the kids that you want, and you're sure you don't want any more, think vasectomy. Tying the man's tubes is the way to choose. Tying the man's tubes is vasectomy. Tying the man's tubes is the way to choose.
Did you get the tone poem? So I mentioned the Meals for Millions Foundation, and they contacted me when I was a senior resident and said, hey, we've got a lot of, again, young women showing up in clinic for their prenatal visits, and they've got corn puffs and pretzels and potato chips and all this stuff, and they asked me if I would write a song for them, and this is what it ended up being.
Pop, top, soda pop, lollipops have gotta stop. You are gonna get fat. Junk food is very crude, stuff in it is really rude. Junk food is not where it's at. If you wanna be slim and healthy, you've gotta eat the right foods every day. If you wanna be trim and healthy, be wise, exercise, eat right every day. Junk food is very crude, stuff in it is really rude. Junk food is not where it's at, you are gonna get fat.
Here we go. So during my residency program down in Charleston, you know, when you're a medical student, you have to pay to go to school, right? But when you get to be a resident, then you're paid. And so a lot of couples then decided, well, maybe we could afford to have a kid. Well, over my 3-year residency in Charleston, I ended up writing and presenting 7 original baptismals, and one actually had a Alleluia chorus. And it was all the residents got together with me, and we all sang it together. So I mentioned that I had the good fortune of being president of the American College of Emergency Physicians. And at the end of that year, I'm the only president of ACEP who's ever sung his final address. And I did 2 songs. Come on. What is EMS all about? It's about time, when time is life. What is EMS all about? It's about time. It's about time. It's about time, when time is life. It's about time. It's about time. It's about time. It's about time, when time is life. I got those words off a poster, and I was in D.C., and a group of us had gone from North Carolina up to meet with our representatives, including congresspeople and senators, and we were lobbying for increasing the EMS budget. And I saw these words on a poster while I was taking a shower before going to meet with those folks. I wrote this song and recorded it shortly thereafter. The other song is, believe it or not, American College of Emergency Physicians. We are here all day and night when you're sick or injured or frightened. We are here when you need us 24 hours a day. We are here for the young. We are here for the elderly. We are here
day. We're ACEP. We're ACEP. College of Emergency Physicians. 24 hours a day. We're ACEP. ACEP. ACEP.
I need to go back one. I wanted to give you this website so that if you would want to hear more of my music, and particularly it has on there my AIDS album. In 1994, I took a sabbatical, and Sue and I went to the beach for a whole month, and we'd never had a week's vacation ever. And when we got back, the answer machine was blinking like crazy, and they said, Jack, we've got, I'd received a lot of phone calls from Africans, but they had come to the States. I'd never received one long distance call from Africa in 25 years. And I got a bunch of calls, and people said, listen, people remember your ugly mug, they remember your music, and we've got an AIDS epidemic, and we want you to write songs about AIDS. I said, yeah, I'd be glad to do it. And I went there, and I wrote 3 songs before I left, and the first week I was there, I wrote 3 more, and then I started interviewing bands, and we recorded 3 songs with one group and 3 songs with the other. And the songs, 3 of them are in Chichewa, the national language of Malawi, but the other 3 were bilingual. And so we figured, you know, Europeans get AIDS as well. So I wanted you to know that that AIDS album raised over $30,000. And since I wrote my first song, we've raised over $170,000 with my music. And I know that over that period of time, it's chump change. But believe me, if you could get $1,000 of protected money to the village level, you can cause small miracles to happen. So, Sue and I were living in, I think we were in Syracuse, and the phone rang one night about 4 o'clock, and a young woman from the State Department said, would you be amenable to going back to Malawi because we still have an AIDS epidemic, and your AIDS album has helped, but we would really appreciate if you would come and tour the country. And we want you to sing about AIDS awareness, education, and prevention. And our son Josh got to join us, and my wife Sue Wilson, and we got to go and tour the country. And I was really pleased that for a whole month during my presentations, I didn't use a word of English, and I was really proud of that. Even after all those years, I still remembered Chichewa. So, you know, I look upon songs and jingles as catalyst. You know, whenever you play like the junk food jingle, if you just play it, and people will, you know, in the South, they'll say, well, ain't that nice? But, you know, it really makes a lot more sense if you facilitate it. And I'm going to play a song in a little bit that even brings that closer to home, amplifies it even more. So facilitation is key. So I toured the country for a whole month. And what we did is that my first presentation, we had 3,000 people surrounding a soccer pitch. And then we started to invite other folks to participate, and it became more of a 2.5 hour, 3 hour show. And we had a one-man band. We had people to recite original poetry. We had choruses, dancers, and during our first show, here I am. opened every show with Ufa Wantedza because it still was popular in Malawi. And I ended every show with that, and I sang about AIDS in the middle. But here you can see they're feeding a baby the Ufa Wantedza while I'm singing the song. And I was asked to go out in the bush with one of the volunteers there and talk about AIDS awareness without my music. And we had dancers. My last show was at Malawi Children's Village, and you can see Sue closest to me, my counterpart, Mr. Chitowe, myself, and his Achitowe's wife. And I really got into it. I played first chair air guitar, and when I was in a band at UNC for 6 months, and I sang over in Burlington at the First Presbyterian Church year-round, and I sang for 3 years straight. And I made more money singing rock and roll for 6 months than I made singing in church for 3 years. So then, come on, Jack. I was asked to go to Kenya and Somalia because they were having a famine there, especially in Somalia. And so I went with a group called Medical Teams International. Most of my work was rendering aid. There were a lot of sick people. 10% I did with public health and similar work that I'd done in Malawi, especially ventilated pit latrines. And I got to go to a game preserve when we got to Nairobi. But then when we went into Somalia, this was a typical house. Before we went out in the bush, I went to the hospital to talk to the director. He was an anesthesiologist, a really good guy, and I wanted to make sure that we could send patients there from out in the bush. And this was the hospital, their charging list, and somebody about to be discharged. If you look up online a town called Dadaab, D-A-D-A-A-B, Kenya. Dadaab, Kenya has more refugees than any other city in the whole wide world, and it varies somewhere between 400,000 and 525,000 people any given day, and this is downtown Dadaab. And had they had telephone service, hell would have been a local call. But we stayed in this compound with a group called World Concern. I learned to drink tea with camel's milk in it. This chap and I were the only two grandfathers in the group. In Chichewa, the word for grandfather is agogo. So there were two agogo in our group, and he and I were the elder statesmen. And I learned to eat some camel meat. Out in the bush, I got to see all kinds of stuff, but one of the things that was really interesting, this was the EMS service when we were out in the bush. This donkey-drawn wagon came up with a severely dehydrated little girl, and we ended up starting an IV on her. We resuscitated her. Once I started the IV, I took some shelter in the Land Rover for a little while. It was hot and it was dusty, and everywhere we went, particularly where they had the water holes, they were shared amongst all the animals, but also amongst the humans. So the people would come and get their water there and then roll it home. This was a makeshift shelter where we did some of our work out in the bush, and there was dung everywhere. The problem for dealing with Muslim, particularly women, as a man, is that one example, woman told me she had chest pain, and I did the history, and then I said, may I listen to your heart? No. May I listen to your lungs? No. May I check your ankles? No. So I felt like it was more like veterinary medicine on human beings, and there's only so much you can do. This is the group I worked with, and you can tell by the body language. There were 2 nurses and the Kenyan PA, and the 3 of us got along famously, but this other gal was, I don't know how she got to go. So when they had the big earthquake down in Haiti, I got a call immediately and said, "Are you willing to go?" And for those of you who remember Dr. George Pullman, he used to be the residency director here in family medicine, and he was then practicing emergency medicine. And even though I was chief of party, George and I worked so well together. I was a master of the obvious, and I predicted the first cholera outbreak, and the second happened after I left. When I came home, I wrote 3 songs, and these are the ones. And the one that Don't Sleep in the Gully, You'll Get Washed Out to Sea, I actually recorded it and left part of it. The music was there, but I got a Haitian to sing the Creole and fill in what I was singing in English, and I'd like to play Wash Your Hands with Soap. Wash your hands with soap. It's our best hope to stop the spread of disease. We need to bring disease to its knees. So wash your hands with soap. Wash your hands with soap. It's our best way to cope with the spread of disease. We need to bring disease to its knees. So wash your hands with soap. 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 We need to bring disease to its knees. So wash your hands with soap. Okay, so before I play, I have 2 songs to play. And one is when Sue Wilson, my wife, worked with Karen Vale Smith, and they worked with what was called the CHAP program. And they did health education all over eastern North Carolina. And it never been done better before they did it, and it's never been done better since they did it. And they wrote the words to the song, and they asked if I would write the music.
Learn the safety rules for your bike and at the pool. Learn the safety rules on the playground and at school. Learn the safety rules. You know it's up to you to learn the safety rules. Learn the safety rules. Don't show off without the skill. Learn the safety rules. Use both hands, avoid a spill. Learn the safety rules. You know it's up to you to learn the safety rules. Ooh, learn the safety rules. Concentrate on what you do. Learn the safety rules. Buckle up your seatbelt too. Learn the safety rules. You know it's up to you to learn the safety. You to learn the safety. You to learn the safety rules. Learn 'em.
Okay, last song. I'm going to Malawi, and I'm leaving on the 23rd of March, and I'll get back on the 9th. And I've been invited to, it's the 20th year celebration of a group called AGE Africa. And the AGE stands for Assuring Girls Education in, Advancing Girls Education in Africa. Even though it says Africa, they're only in one country. They're in Malawi. So I wrote this jingle for them, and they've used it to raise money, and they've asked me to be a part of the festivities and to visit some of the creme de la creme of the schools, and this is the song, 1 minute jingle. Come on. Age Africa, Age Africa, advancing girls' education. In Africa we educate, we mentor, we develop future leaders. We help girls in Malawi finish school by teaching our scholars these in Africa. Please help those in Malawi finish school. Please donate right away. Your gift will go a long, long way. Log on to our website today, www.ageafrica.org. Hey! I was invited to go to Cape Town in 2016 for the 25th anniversary of the formation of the International Federation for Emergency Medicine. And I sang an a cappella song, Down Among the Dead Men, and I got a standing ovation. So what I would like to do is ask that you consider buying my book. You don't have to, but Sue and I are giving away all the proceeds, and so far we've given away, we've written 5 $1,000 checks, and as I mentioned before, if you get that amount of protected money to the village level, you can do some good stuff. So, let's talk. What you want to know?
Any questions? I have a microphone. I'll just speak through it so the people online can hear us. Just raise your hand.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Cheers.
I'm a resident of the hospital, so I really enjoyed listening to this.
Thank you.
There's no shortage of need in any of these countries in Southern Africa. I'm sure anywhere you've been, in Haiti, there's enough seats at the table for everyone, at least in this room. How did you kind of decide through your career where you and your family would serve and would help? How was that guidance provided?
Well, if it hadn't been for my 3 years in Africa, I don't know if I'd ever written one song, because I only write songs when I'm prompted. I don't sit around and write love songs and gooey stuff. I usually write music with a message. That's my calling, I guess. So, you know, I have enjoyed so much going back. I'm almost sure that this will be the 13th time that I will have been on the African country since 1967. And, you know, you keep going back because I feel like I'm making a modest contribution. So, and it really freaks people out, particularly when I speak Chichewa. Josh will tell you that, said a couple of the young guys he was talking to, and he said, you know, we have to be careful what we say around your dad because he knows what the hell we're talking about. But I don't speak university Chichewa. I speak village. I lived in a village for 3 years. So, you know, I'm really bashful to talk on the radio, and now they have television. And when I'll tell them I will talk, I'll do it mostly in English, but I'll use Chichewa words and phrases, and that way I feel comfortable. But I appreciate the question. Thanks. Skip? Do you have something?
Any questions?
So what's the most important thing to you? You know, there was a great history of emergency medicine. Not a lot of people know about that. So in your life, what's been the most important thing? How are you driven? What is that?
You reckon?
And can you rub some of that off?
Well, I think the one thing I think I've got a lot of energy, and I think I've focused a lot of that energy. And I saw some needs along the way that weren't being filled, like the whole idea of having an endowed chair. I was a cocky little twit. But guess what? It caused it to happen. If you look around the country now of how many departments have endowed chairmanships, it's amazing. But I was number 2. So I think that my international work in both emergency medicine and in public health has meant the most to me. I mean, but I have so many high moments. it's really hard to choose. But I mean, I'm blessed, for gosh sakes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What's your favorite jingle and why?
I know vasectomy is really popular because but you know, it's amazing because when Molly asked me to do this, I had 150 songs. Which one am I going to choose? You know, I was invited a couple years ago to do, when they had the COVID-19 pandemic in Malawi. I did a song in Chichewa, no English, about COVID-19. Of course, I had to go to Malawi to get them to make sure. You know, once you record it, it's forever. So if you make a mistake, it's going to glare. And so I surprised a group in Tanzania. We met a couple in Asheville. Their parents lived there, and they're sort of the Jane Goodall of, you know, Goodall dealt with chimpanzees. She and her husband deal with giraffes. So I wrote a jingle, 1-minute jingle in Swahili about protecting the giraffes. Hasa Twiga means especially giraffes, and I asked them, don't eat bushmeat. Well, bushmeat includes the giraffes. So, you know, and that spawned a video in, well, first of all, it was re-recorded by a church choir, and it was disseminated throughout Tanzania, and then a group, when they heard that, then they wrote another deal, and they had it filmed, and it was distributed around the country. And again, it's protecting giraffes. So, you know, it's a beginning. It's like when I sang the song about learn the safety rules. I think that's the songs and jingles, to me, are the beginning of a conversation. It doesn't solve the problem immediately, but if you can just imagine a teacher saying, okay, you just heard that song. How many things did that guy sing about the safety rules? And how many more things can you come up with that would really make us safer, keep us from getting injured or even killed, that kind of thing. So that's how I see myself as using the music. Herb.
Hey, Dr. Allison.
Cheers,
So I'm going to tell a quick story on Dr. Allison, and then I'll ask a question. Great leaders are great recruiters. You got to get the right people on the bus. And if you just look around this room, you see some of the people that Dr. Allison recruited and came up to have a great department. And so he mentioned that, people that he brought in, but he didn't tell you about his recruiting methods. So when I was finishing up my residency here, Dr. Allison came up to me and said, Herb, I want you to be our first EMS fellow. And I said, I don't know, Dr. Allison, I should probably go work and make some money and da-da-da-da-da. Well, why don't you just let me take you out to dinner? And I said, okay. So we go out to dinner, and we have 2 cocktails. And then we drink a whole bottle of wine, and then we have after dinner drinks. And at the end of the meal, he says, well, what do you think? Should you want to be our first EMS fellow? And I said, hand me the piece of paper, I'll sign it. He was a great recruiter. So when I think of what you've done, Jack, where you had this phenomenal career in emergency medicine, you could have stopped there. But, and this is going to humble you a little bit, but I compare you to sort of like President Carter, who was at the pinnacle being the president of the United States, and then had the most phenomenal post-presidency career. And we got what sort of inspired you, but what's your message to people that are retiring, going on to their next part of life, to like keep going? Would you talk about that for a second?
Well, that is it. Just keep going and find out what really turns your jets, and keep doing that. So, you know, I've been blessed that I honestly can write music. And so, you know, it's a lot of fun to do, and I keep doing that, but I don't have a song in my head right now because I don't have that motivation. But when I do, like Age Africa, I did one for another group called Core Africa. So it's spelled like Peace Corps or Marine Corps, but it's one word with capital C and then Africa conjoined, Corps Africa. Well, the gal who started that was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco, and she decided that she thought it would be better, instead of redneck boys like me going to Africa, learning the language, learning the culture, eating different foods, all that stuff, and all of a sudden 2 years later you're done. And she said, why don't we recruit locals to serve locals? So I looked up their website and I got the keywords, and I recorded that song for them, and they've used it for recruiting and for raising money too. So, you know, it's my gift to them. I've never, ever, ever charged anyone for any of my music. I've given it away. Chris.
Two questions. Motivations, inspirations. What led you to the Peace Corps? First question.
Yeah. Well, I had done 3 years of undergrad at Chapel Hill and then 2 prior, and I was really worn down. And I wanted to do something that I thought would be halfway meaningful. I had no idea. You know, when Mr. Kennedy became president during my senior year of high school, and that was indelible to me, and I really, really appreciated, you know, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Most of us who joined the Peace Corps at that time were still imbued with that, and that rubbed off on me. So
what inspired you to choose emergency medicine over every other specialty?
Damn good question. When I was at MUSC in Charleston, when we first got there, we had 2 months of behavioral health, and it was on the hoof behavioral health. I mean, 60% of family medicine visits usually deal with some degree of behavioral stuff. And I really felt that we residents got a tremendous foundation in that. Well, my first rotation was on OBGYN, but we went to the ED a lot. And then my next rotation was 2 months in the ED. And son of a gun, I saw the potential. My gosh, look at all these people. 60,000 visits the first year during my residency in Charleston, and I saw the potential there, but the problem was there was no faculty supervision. And I said, you know what? I think I would be a better resident if I could go to a senior guy like Dr. Meggs and say, Dr. Meggs, I got this patient. He'll say, did you do this, 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 and this? Yes, sir. But did you do this, this, and this? No. Well, go do that and come back and we'll talk about it. So those are the kinds of things that we didn't have on the hoof, and I saw a tremendous potential there. I actually wrote the first application for the residency for emergency medicine in Charleston as a senior family medicine resident. So, yeah, so I was intimately involved in that. I appreciate the question, because the word is the juice. I just love not knowing what's coming in, and I think a lot of us in the ED are stress jockeys, you know, or junkies, but you know, you got to be prepared, and you got to know what your limits are, and you got to know when to call somebody else.
I remember you saying the juice.
The juice. We got 15 more minutes. What do you want to know?
We have a question online
Yes.
that says, when you look back on your career, Dr. Allison, what would you consider your finest accomplishment?
Oh, God. Marrying Sue Wilson.
That's the right answer.
I'm ugly, but I ain't dumb.
Understandably, your presentation has covered beautiful peaks in your life, but I also know a lot of people see the suffering in the world or burn out from these careers as well. And so I wondered what keeps your spirit strong, whether it's people, practices, dispositions, or activities.
Well, that's a real good question. And I think it helps to be a professional stranger, because Sue used to ask me when Josh would get an earache, Jack, I think Josh has an earache. And I'd say, it sounds like he's got an earache. She said, well, aren't you going to look? And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So there's certain things that, I didn't want that responsibility. I'd rather have a professional deal with that, because emotionally, I couldn't deal with it, and I admit it. But I think it helps to be able to pull back. When I went to Haiti, I'm going to be honest with you, I'd never smelled rotting human flesh ever. I started med school in 1971, and I went to Haiti in 2010, I think it was, and son of a gun, there were so many people who were entrapped under the rubble. The other issue was we got there so early, we took care of some horrendous stuff, but we didn't have an ED. And a lot of the help we had, me and George Pullman and a PA from the States and a bunch of primarily Haitian American nurses who went back with us, and American Airlines flew us for free. And I asked for 5 things before I went. I want safety, I want water and food and shelter, and I asked for a satellite phone, and I got 4 out of 5. I didn't know how much the expense of a satellite phone, but I'll tell you, what you do as an emergency doc is you roll up your sleeves and do the best you can. So, I'm really pleased with my career. I've taken care of a lot of people in my career. I added it up one time that I think, counting med school, that I'd seen 65,000 patients in my career, and a third of those were pediatrics. So, and when I was in Malawi for 3 years taking care of kids from birth to 5 years of age, I wasn't afraid of kids. Good question, thank you. Anything else? Yes, Susan.
I love your music. I love your music.
Thank you.
I love your songs, but I also love the performances. How did you find these people and the musicians to do such a great job?
Well, thanks. Well, in Africa, I stumbled upon the best band in Malawi, and I only recorded songs with them and one other band. And one time they were out, the Jazz Giants were out on a tour, and I was asked to write a song about, I was asked to get into a contest, and there were songs being written and recorded about the wonders of fertilizer. And I wrote a 20-second jingle about the wonders of fertilizer, that it will increase your crop yield and increase, how much food you'll have to eat for your family and those kinds of things. And there was a cash prize for it, and I won. And so that was another thing where every time I turned around, I was making money. And so we just put it in the mini foundation, and that's how I got to bring a kid home with me to send him to college. Good stuff. Yes, sir, I got one more.
Hi, thank you for your talk.
Yeah.
So I'm a Brody student. I'm going into emergency medicine.
Cheers.
Yeah, and my question is, so I'm actually submitting where I want to go tonight. Amongst other places, big cities, New York, LA. What are the competitive stances that ECU has for doing emergency medicine. So I know it's a capture area of 29 counties. We serve 1 million people. Is that what makes ECU competitive for emergency medicine back when you were the chair and also for today?
Well, I think this place obviously started de novo, and it's been on a crescendo ever since. And that's what I celebrate as part of my personal legacy. But my God, I've been gone a long time. I came here 45 years ago, and you won't believe it. All of this stuff didn't exist. There was the hospital up front. There was a walkway to the Department of Family Medicine and a walkway into Brody. There was nothing else. Across the way, there was a separate building for AHEC, for the Area Health Education Center. That was it. All of this stuff, the Department of Nursing across the way. Dentistry didn't exist. Public health didn't exist. All this stuff that's here, the Heart Center, none of that stuff was here. So this is what's happened over the years, and that's what makes it competitive. I think that one of the problems that all of the residencies face is the issue of ED overcrowding. It was a problem when we were here. It was a problem when Herb came, when Juan came, when I was here. It's still a problem, and it's an international problem. Input, throughput, output. Who controls? The emergency department doesn't control that. And I know there have been at least 4 chairs since I've been here, and 2 chairs have been punished and 2 have not. I wonder why. But that's a political issue. But the issue is still there. ED overcrowding, no matter where you go, you're going to be taking care of people in the hallway. So what makes us competitive? It's the excellence. And I think if I were chair here again, I would make sure that research got ramped up. The 2 people I mentioned earlier, Bill Meggs and Juan March, and Rick Hunt. But I think that there are others who've made contributions along the way in terms of the quality and volume of their research. And I think that that's what I would look at. Do they teach? Do they take care of sick folks well? Do they publish their research? Because you can do all the research in the whole wide world. If you don't get it published, it's not worth 2 dead flies. So you gotta do it, perform it, but then you gotta get it into print. So find out if they're good teachers and what kind of community service do they do? Because when I was here, that was a demand for anybody in all departments. You had to do a certain amount of community service to get promoted. Good question. Thank you. Hey, y'all, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you. I mentioned you earlier.
And for the
I did.
if
Hey.
you did not get a chance to sign in, if you're ever running food, please
I
do
know,
so.
I
So we
know.
have a
Well, I
head
don't blame
count,
you, boy.
And there's plenty more snacks if anybody wants some.
I think we did it wrong. We should have come before that band moved through.
Yeah,
We
well.
ended up in the worst of it, so it really slowed us